Blackfriars Priory, Scotland, February 20th, 1437. King James I of Scotland reclines in a bedchamber with his wife Joan of Beaufort and her servants, relaxing after a hard day of tennis, when suddenly there's a commotion outside, and the royal couple rises to discover a large group of men storming the building. James hurries to lock the door, but finds the bar missing. He then tries the windows, but they won't open. Oh no, has his bedchamber been tampered with? Oh, it had. And at that moment, his trusted chamberlain is leading a group of assassins to the room. Desperate, James pries up a floorboard and attempts to scramble into a sewer he knows runs below. Meanwhile, at the door, servants try to delay the assassins. One even places her arm in the rung of the locking bar, but the attackers slam against the door until her arm snaps, forcing it open. They spot the broken floorboards easily. Meanwhile, down in the sewer, the king despairs as he's now trapped. He'd forgotten he'd ordered the drain blocked, because he kept losing tennis balls down it. And there, the King of Scotland dies, and the chain of revenge is set. Thanks so much to Factor for keeping us fed on a busy schedule. If you like tales of political intrigue, mafia-style clans, cold-blooded murders, and hot-blooded reprisals, you, my friends, have come to the right place. Because today, we're going to look at the Black Dinner, the infamously brutal event that was the historical inspiration for the Red Wedding in Game of Thrones. But to tell that sort of tale, we need to get the setting right. So, think of a harsh landscape of castles and wilderness, racked by political feuds, and populated by powerful families not afraid to get their hands bloody. Welcome, in other words, to late medieval Scotland. As we covered up top, in 1437, a rival political faction murdered King James I in the sewer below Blackfriars Priory. But the assassins made one basic mistake. They didn't kill James's wife, Joan of Beaufort. Though injured, she somehow survived and escaped. And funny enough, the ex-Miss Stewart was, let's just say, less than thrilled about her injuries and the murder of her beloved husband. So, as soon as she was able, she put out a hit of her own on the assassins. And, just so we can speed through this story's appetizer and get to the main course, this is where we cue a lot of dead assassins. But while Joan got her revenge, her son James II was still a child. In fact, he'd only turned 7 the day after his father's sewer killing, and was therefore too young to assume the throne. No big deal, though. The young James and his mother were allied with Archibald Douglas, 5th Earl of Douglas. Famed as the Black Douglases, the Douglas clan were the most powerful noble family in Scotland. They'd risen to prominence in the early 14th century as loyal supporters of Robert the Bruce, the king who bested the English in Scotland's War of Independence. Ever since then, the Douglases had been acquiring land and prestige, expanding their power base in southern Scotland. So basically, they were the last family you wanted to make an enemy of, and the first one you wanted on your side, especially if you were a vulnerable boy king. And Archibald Douglas would have surely kept young James safe and, compliant with his own interests, were it not for one small problem. In 1439, 2 years after James II became nominal king, Archibald died from a fever. His heir was William Douglas, who was himself only 15 years old and hardly a fit guardian for the young James. So in swooped the enemies of James II and his mother Joan, specifically one William Crichton, the powerful Lord Chancellor of Scotland. Crichton essentially kidnapped James, saying he would be the young king's new guardian until he came of age. In reality, though, Crichton kept James as a comfortable prisoner in Edinburgh Castle, a brooding stronghold that perched atop the rocky crag overlooking Scotland's capital. You said it, bud. Anyway, in 1440, the young William Douglas received an unexpected summons. James II, with permission from his so-called guardian Crichton, had invited him for dinner. As was customary, the Douglases were promised safe passage. Attending feasts was a common way for the nobility of the period to meet, interact, and conduct the business of state. So both the 16-year-old William Douglas and his younger brother, the 12-year-old David Douglas, accepted the offer, setting off through the wind and rain of a Scottish winter. Edinburgh Castle, November 24th, 1440. The great hall resounds with merriment and feasting. The wine is flowing, the hearth is glowing, and the first main courses have already been consumed. At the high table, the young King James is playing host to the 2 other youths, the brothers William and David Douglas. And James is enamored by the pair, enjoying their company. None have the first inkling as to what's about to happen. Servants begin to carry out the feast's main course, but as the crowd catches sight of it, the sounds of excitement and rejoicing fade, and the courtly music goes silent. The food placed before William and David Douglas is no tasty delicacy, but rather the severed head of a black bull. King James and the young Douglases stare at it in shock, all knowing the symbolism. For in Scotland, the head of a black bull is an omen symbolizing one thing: death. Shouts and screams break the edgy silence as men grab William and David. James rises too, protesting voraciously, but he's ignored. Helpless, and their pleas unheard, the two young guests are dragged out of the feasting hall. At William Crichton's command, William and David Douglas are hauled to Edinburgh's place of execution on Castle Hill. Given a brief mock trial, they're found guilty of plotting against the very king who, moments before, had been enjoying their company. And without more words, the two boys are beheaded. The killings shocked Scotland, not only as acts of infanticide, but also because they violated the customs of hospitality that underpinned medieval Scottish life. To invite a fellow noble into your hall was to promise them safety and protection. Therefore, the murder of the young Douglases was a betrayal of the highest order. But just who ordered it, and why? Of course, as the public face of the killings, William Crichton was obviously involved, but he wasn't the only one. There were other nobles with gains to be made following the deaths of William and David Douglas, and none more so than the boys' great uncle, James Douglas. Yep, as in any good story of medieval intrigue, it was likely the scheming uncle who was behind it all along. James Douglas, known as James the Gross, stood to inherit the lands and titles in the event of his nephew's sudden demise. We assume the plan for what would become known as the Black Dinner was subsequently hatched with Crichton and possibly a few others, though they covered their tracks well, likely in secret meetings with furtive messages to leave no hard clues about their involvement. But in truth, the outcome showed James Douglas's hand clearly enough. Once the unfortunate boys met their end and were disposed of in an unmarked Edinburgh grave, James the Gross became the 7th Earl of Douglas and one of the most powerful men in Scotland. But now you might be asking, just how much of the detail in this story is true? Well, as with so much from this period, it's hard to be absolutely certain. The closest we've come to a primary source is the Auchinleck Chronicle, which says only that William Douglas and his younger brother David were put to deed, or put to death. Whether there was a treacherous dinner featuring a bull's head isn't mentioned. However, later medieval and Renaissance writers started to include it in their histories, sometimes describing the animal omen as a black boar instead, and the account was cemented by famed author Sir Walter Scott, whose 19th century novels essentially created the medieval Scotland we imagine today. But whatever the truth of that night, the Douglas brothers' murder seemed to have a lasting effect on the young King James II. He survived his troubled upbringing and eventually turned the tables on the villainous James Douglas's son. Fittingly, King James II invited William Douglas, son and inheritor of the murderous James Douglas, to a feast in Stirling Castle in 1452, 12 years after the Black Dinner of Edinburgh. During the banquet, James and a number of other men sprung up and attacked Douglas, stabbing him 26 times before they, according to the Auchinleck Chronicle, struck his brains out with a poleaxe and tossed his body out a window. It seemed the ghosts of William and David Douglas finally had their revenge on the family of their treacherous great-uncle. The Black Dinner has made for a dark, compelling story for over 5 centuries, a blend of fact with a likely pinch of fiction. And like all dramatic historical events, it spawned other tales, including some taking place in the realms of the fantastic. And Scotland is rife with such stories, weaving a rich tapestry that runs from the past into the present. And whether the exact details of the Black Dinner are true or not, one thing is for sure. Today in Scotland, severed bull's head remains decidedly off the menu. And running with that whole theme of no bull, I'm going to now turn this tale back toward deliciousness and tell you about what I had for lunch today. Factor. Now, if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know I've talked about meal delivery services like HelloFresh, which I do love because I really do enjoy cooking when I have the time, which is not often these days. So what am I supposed to do, right? I can't just have frozen meals all the time because there's just too many preservatives and they always kind of taste like garbo. And then my bank account can't really handle more than a few takeout orders a month. So my solution, honestly, has been Factor, which is this amazing pre-prepared meal delivery service that takes the guesswork out of my breakfast, lunch, and dinner that all of my friends are just very sick of me telling them about. Every meal is ready in around 2 minutes, and there is zero prep, zero mess, just good dang food. Also, Factor really does give you a ton of meal options to choose from, and you can basically use it to achieve almost any nutritional goal you may have. They got everything from keto, calorie smart, protein plus, veggie, vegan options, and more, all of which you can choose from in their taste-tacular rotating weekly menus. I do mine at the start of every week. I get excited about it. Yes, I am that guy. And I am quite glad I stocked up this week because we relaunched Extra Mythology, and that's been keeping me a tad busier than usual. So rather than eating something bad for me or skipping lunch altogether to get work done, instead I'm having fusilli and ground pork tomato ragu, which, I was planning on eating right after I did this read, but just smelled so dang good, I figured I'm going to eat it while I do the read. Here we go. Yeah, This is what I needed in my life. So if you'd like to eat better while also being better with your time, really all you gotta do is head over to factor75.com/extracredits50 and then use the code extracredits50 to get 50% off your first Factor box. And when you do, not only will you be getting fast, tasty meals that fit your lifestyle and be helping out this channel in the process, but you'll also be joining the myriad of my personal friends who I've suggested to jump on this Factor train, and they seem to be liking it as well. We are legion now. Oh, and don't sleep on their smoothies either. Did I mention they have smoothies? They have pretty dang good smoothies. You can't have this one as mine. Again, that is code extracredits50 to get 50% off your first box at factor75.com/extracredits50. Seriously, I've been really enjoying these, and I do not think you're going to be disappointed. What if I told you that Ahmed Ziad Turk, Angela Valenciana, Arclight Games, Casey Mustia, Dominic Valenciana, Joseph Blame, Kuya Koi, and Skylar Holmes were all legendary patrons? I'm not kidding.